Morning, evening, wherever you are joining from today. I'm really excited about our little webinar today that's going to dive into a really exciting data points going 12 years back in time, looking at climate and effectiveness. And obviously climate is one of those really, really tough topics. It does seem like most of the time climate communication end up being sort of reaching for the bullshit mountain summit, and a lot of it doesn't really come across as very authentic. And so today hopefully we can share why some of this stuff really is effective and why it can in fact drive brand love. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Thomas and I'm obviously from Good Advertising, and today I'm being joined by my two lovely colleagues, Amy and Anya, who's doing a very, very young and hip thing, calling in from the car. I'm kind of just the one who's stuck in a hotel room today, but the car thing, that's kind of cool. Anyway, sustainability and especially climate is obviously quite a complex issue to navigate, and I think that makes it probably even harder to get right. I mean, I'm originally from Denmark, and I don't know how much you know about Denmark, but traditionally Denmark is one of those countries, and this kind of shows the complexity, so one of those countries that are being sort of coined as a very, very green country. And it is true that when the wind is blowing, and on most days, we are getting our renewable energy, we are getting most of our energy from renewable energy, sometimes 100% of our energy sources from renewable energy. But when we look at in fact, at the climate footprint of an average day, and it's around 13 tons, and where we should be heading is 3 tons. So it almost begs the question: are we in fact then really sustainable? And so I think we are, all of us, always sort of navigating this complex reality. Another thing is obviously the sort of tokenism around plastic bags. And yes, a plastic bag is made of oil, but the other thing is that we need to be using it a lot of times before it actually makes up for the footprint of, for example, one of those really cool cotton organic tote bags we might be running around with. I think the last time I read it was like 35 times you need to be using that tote bag. My issue, I'll be honest with this, is I have way too many tote bags lying around, so not really great for the environment. And lastly, before we dive into this amazing data set here today, even look at something as simple as a t-shirt. So on paper, you would think that, wait a moment, organic cotton t-shirt should be great, but yet again, carbon footprint higher, and in fact, we end up with an H&M or others who do polyester t-shirts, or at least partially polyester, other synthetic fibers, and that having a lower carbon footprint. So maybe it's not that strange that consumers are very confused about this. Please, as we go along, we will have lots of time for questions. If a question comes to your mind, feel free to pop that into the chat. Absolutely amazing, and I'll come back to that, or you can also just ask the question as we do a little sort of midway break through this. Cool, let's go directly into the little presentation that we have prepared for you here today. And then, as I said, we will do a little Q&A break along the way, so it doesn't become too much monologue. And feel free to share the presentation, and we will also give you the slides, and at the very end also the report behind a lot of this data. But first and foremost, obviously, maybe we have a big challenge in terms of rethinking the climate narrative. This is a very famous photo that appeared about a decade ago, obviously a very heartbreaking photo showcasing a polar bear, I think actually shot in Canada, very, very close to starvation. Recently, actually, it was the winner of the World Press Photo, I think. And recently there was this photo which has a lot more optimism, care, but still kind of begs and ask some pretty fundamental questions here. So there's a narrative that needs to be shifted. But What we're going to focus on today is sort of what drives effectiveness. And this has been a question that I've been curious about from the very, very beginning of my career. I've been in space for about 18 years. And from the very first book I wrote, Good Advertising, I had a very, very simple mantra, which is what's good for people and planet is good for brand and bottom line. And I think over these years, I've tried to be as investigative and asking questions to kind of truly understand if that is the case. And that's also why I'm so happy about this research that we kicked off with WARC about 3 years ago. It came on the back of a conversation I had during Cannes 3 years ago with the WARC team, because they have done this called the WARC Effective 100, looking at the world's 100 most effective campaigns, obviously awarded campaigns. These are broadly award interest from across the world, from award shows like the Effies, which really takes a hard look at the effectiveness data behind it, to obviously the big award shows that we all know, like a D&AD or Cannes Lions or Spike Asia, Dubai Links, or whatever it might be. So it's just good for context to know these are only awarded works that makes it into the WARC Effective 100. So they've been doing that study for now 12 years. And in Cannes, I obviously asked them the question, but you guys got to have like, how does environmental and social campaigns show up? And so that's where our study started. And today we're going to focus obviously on the climate side of these things, but we will also obviously reveal the social numbers. So 2 years ago, we came out with the first batch. The first time, at least what I know, that anybody have looked at a whole decade of effectiveness and how that plays out in terms of the social themes and the environmental themes. So what you will be seeing here is blue color representing work campaigns that has a social theme, the green one in an environmental theme, and sort of pinkish, whatever color that is, both themes being present. And this is as a core theme. It looks a little bit different when we look at ads that has a side theme. But if we look at it, in fact, it's quite surprising and interesting to see that over that decade, about more or less 3 out of 10, 30% of these campaigns have E or an S in front of them. Though when we break it down, we do see that it's not as significant on the environmental side. So we don't see the same amount of campaigns showing up. I wasn't actually too surprised about this when I kicked off the research, because it does seem like marketeers have an easier, it's easier for them to create things around diversity and inclusion, for example, as it translates easier to something that's relatable. So when we dive into this data, we will also see what type of campaigns that does well and what some of the levers that we need to be using going forward. So this is the first time we did the decade, and then last year we had our 2024 numbers, and just 2 weeks ago the 2025 numbers. So the report is not even out yet, the full report. So you're going to have a preview of the full report. I did a recording with the WARC team podcast as well around all the new data set, and that one will be out on Tuesdays. You can see that on our social media or newsletter. We'll make sure to share that with you as well. When we look at the sort of product categories, and this is again for the whole decade, the ones that are sort of dominating is sort of retail, food, toiletries, and cosmetics. Financial services are the ones that are sort of primarily driving these campaigns. Secondly, when we look at the regions, North America, Asia, Europe sort of dominating. There has been, though, when we look at the new numbers, a bit of a shift. So there seems to be a bit more of a geographic spread that's happening right now. And again, this is the numbers, the decade. When we look at the brands, these are some of the brands, and again, you can see blue and green playing out here. So again, predominantly social issues, but you do see DB Export Beer having done a couple of campaigns, Finnish, P&G brand, and some Volvo stuff. It's interesting with the car brands because when I started my journey with the first book, it was interesting to see that automotives were very, very dominating back then, and also something that I have seen play out when we looked at the Super Bowl ads over a decade. Car ads very dominating in the environmental space. Obviously, it has a sort of an innovation reason behind it as well, with the sort of surge of EVs, and seems a little bit ridiculous today. But obviously also the addition of biofuels, which at that time was quite a novelty. So these are sort of the decade numbers, but I really want to sort of zoom forward to to 2024 and 2025. Obviously, we have heard a lot about pushback against environment and the social agenda in general, probably primarily led by change in political situation, geographic pressure, geopolitical realities, etc. So I wonder what your expectations are to 2025. You're welcome to share that in the chat as well. What sort of your expectations were to these last 2 years, how they would show up. Would we see a downward sort of number in the effectiveness, or will we see a rise in effectiveness? So you're more than welcome to share your thoughts there about that in the chat. And a bit of drum roll here before I reveal the numbers, because I was surprised, but also excited, because as you see, in fact, 2024 and 2025 saw quite a substantial surge in the numbers of effective cut-through cases. So we are around 40% of the world's most effective work when we look at the effectiveness hunters. This is out of the 100 campaigns globally, and as we can see, we got 5 sort of environmentally themed campaigns in 2024 and 4 environmentally themed campaigns in 2025. So it does seem like that might not actually have changed that much, but obviously we can be happy, all of us, to see that obviously the social side of these things are changing. So in some ways, good ammunition for all of you if you want to go into a marketing meeting, or if you're from the agency side, you want to convince your clients that this is worth investing in. I think this really showcased that environmental and social campaigns really deliver at the cash register, and that's an important reminder in these quite challenging times. And I also think it's an opportunity in a time where more brands are a bit more silent in this space. There's an opportunity there to invest, and typically also what we see during cost of living crisis and a bit of an economic slowdown, that tend to be more product promotional focused campaigns rather than brand focused campaigns. So before we just go into a bit of a quick Q&A session, and then we'll go into some deeper stuff. We'll show some of the campaigns, some of the environmental campaigns, and some of the takeaways from what we have learned from the climate campaigns over 12 years. And we'll also zoom in specifically on some of the campaigns from 2024 and 2025. It's a really great opportunity to rewatch, or maybe for the very first time for you to acquaint yourself with some of the really, really great, outstanding and effective work in this category here. But another thing I just want to touch on, and this is not from the climate side at all, but this is from the social side, and one of the brands that have sort of continued to push through in all of this has been Dove. So Dove consistently over the 12 years have showed up and actually just couple of weeks ago, we were hosting for our Impact Leaders program. I'll come back to that. It's a CMO CSO accelerator. We were hosting Alessandro Manfredi, who is the former Dove global CMO, for a session to talk about sort of the success behind Dove and some of the key takeaways. And I thought it'd just be interesting to kind of share those with you here today, and see how that also reflects back in some of what we have pulled out of the more than 1,200 pieces of work that we have analyzed. And so paraphrasing Alessandro here, one of the things he said was that purpose is only as strong as the human tension underneath it. So he was very much focused on finding a social tension. And Dove, the social tension there is obviously that a lot of women don't feel as beautiful as they really are. So a really interesting insight that's been able to execute again and again and again. Then he talked about a brand do before brand say. So really showing up and doing things rather than just talking about things. I did mention that in the introduction as well, in terms of not being stuck on a sort of bullshit mountain. Consistency. This is something we see across the environmental campaigns and social campaigns. DB Export is an example from that on the climate side. When you found your platform, keep investing in it. Don't start zigzagging. I know it's hard because new agency, maybe there's a new CMO coming into the organization, and it's very tempting to sometimes change course. Leadership makes or breaks it is another very strong point from him. Involving the consumer beats preaching to them. He also reiterated something that's very aligned with my latest book called The Hero Trap. So something that definitely Alessandro and I are agreeing on. And then lastly, so purpose differentiation is not the same as sustainable responsibility. So for him, very much about how you can differentiate yourself and having a clear, distinct purpose. And I can see there's still people joining us here all the time. So welcome to all of you who are just joining us now. What we have been looking at is the WARC Effectiveness 100 data and how that has showed up. And just to summarize that very quickly, 30% globally of the world's most effective work actually does have an environmental or social angle to it. So I will just kind of stop this a little bit just now, just to give people a chance to maybe ask questions before we dive into a bit more of the work. And we're going to see some of this amazing work. I'm just maybe going to show this one here as well at the same time, but let's jump into just, this is the graph obviously that has showed up here. But I can see there is, let me just start with the questions in the chat, and then I can see Lucia. Thank you. So good to see you, Lucia. By the way, Lucia is actually part of our Impact Leaders program, so it's really good to see you here today, Lucia.
Hi.
What's questions? Yeah, but maybe Lucia, if you start with your question, then I could go to one that's been asked by Marine. So good to see you.
My pleasure. Hi, everyone. I have a question referring to the percentage of campaigns which is absent zero, merging environmental and social aspect within the concept of sustainability. So is this, in your opinion, a positive thing, that basically the concept of sustainability keeps on being polarized between environment and social, whereas by definition should be in between these two aspects? So is this a positive trend, or it's maybe the fact that companies find it too difficult to align the two areas of sustainability and therefore they do not communicate them both in parallel?
I think that's such an interesting question. I mean, there's probably others in this webinar today that got a good answer to that. I think, I mean, in my opinion, I still feel that even though we should have had plenty of time to learn as an industry, I still think that there is probably too big of a gap between the world of marketing and the world of sustainability, because I agree with you completely that if I'm talking to chief sustainability officer or somebody who's very well versed in impact, I think it's not really that difficult to connect the social side with the environmental side, because those two things are very, very often interconnected. And I think it is one of the probably potential ways of actually making environmental issues connect with consumers, is to maybe take a social environmental angle. But it's not something that we really see so much as dominating in the WARC research. When I look at the cases, you will be seeing them in a minute, the ones that at least have come out 2024, 2025, and 2023. So I think it's a good point, Lucia. I think there's ample opportunity to explore that. How do you connect the two in a better way? There are some that has that as a side theme. So what we typically would see, there's a campaign from, for example, Knorr in Egypt that does make rooftop farms in Cairo, so to support farmers, but obviously also touching on sort of environmental topics, things like natural ingredients, etc., that sort of lends itself to, I guess, a better quality Knorr product. At least that's one of them that comes to mind. There might be one or two others that we'll be seeing, but it's a really good question there, Lucia. Marine asked, what brand industries leading these figures for 2024, 2025? Thank you, Marine. So in terms of industries, we did see quite a shift. So as you might remember for what I showed you before, so let's just go back to that slide so we're all on the same page here. So how the industry sort of looked at when we looked at a whole decade, we did have retail, food, toiletries and cosmetics and financial services there, and alcoholic drinks quite far up. What we've seen in 2024 and 2025 is, in fact, the number one is toiletries and cosmetics, and number two suddenly becomes financial services. So we do see a shift there. Obviously, the data set is somehow different in the sense that here over a decade we look at about 1,000 individual campaigns, whereas on an individual year, 2024, 2025, look at about 40. So obviously it shows up a little bit different. But I do actually see this generally, that financial services show up more predominantly. And another thing, there's a report out by a company called Brighton Finance. They do a really exciting report that connects the value of brand plus sustainability and put a numeric value on that, either sort of like if there's a risk, etc. But they also look at drivers, and actually in one of where sustainability makes the biggest purchasing driver is actually in fact in the sort of luxury cosmetic space. So maybe there is a correlation there, but obviously those are two independent types of research, and I haven't been part of the brand finance research on that. Cool. So let me just check if there are more questions, and again, we will have time to dive into
Thomas?
Yes.
It's Annalisa here. Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you. Very good.
Yeah. And yeah, look, I'm here because I'm trying like you to understand, and in part that's the question from Lucia about how do we make sustainability more exciting for marketeers and brands? The industry has done a good, decent job on D&I, as I said, and I think, all things nature, biodiversity, water, oceans, all those themes are actually highly emotional. And I'm like you, banging my head against the wall and wondering why there aren't actually big brands leaning into this space. But when I look better, I actually see some, but they are not the big guys. And so my question is, what do you think people like us should do in terms of making this magic click happen? And how did it start in diversity, equality, and inclusion? And can we repeat history? And because sustainability is a lot more complex, perhaps we should break it down. And you know, the industry ranking that you showed on the slide, but also the inevitable issues that are out there point clearly to food and beverage. There's a massive crisis coming. Why don't we just start from that sector? Transportation is already happening. Renewable, it's an inevitable corridor of change. So I wonder if we shouldn't collectively be smarter and break it down in you know, and point sectors rather and just really try to converge to some brands and businesses and share more stories. For example, and I finish, you know, your slides are amazing, and I know you want to show the ads, but I still think out there aren't enough case studies. You know, I would love to write a book where there's just a collection of case studies, because that's what marketeers will connect with, you know, and it's not, you know, it's not, we are data people, but it's not really the data is really showing examples. So what do you think about this topic?
No, I love it, and very, very good input. I mean, I've seen it from the very onset. I mean, even when we did the research for advertising back in, a lot of that was done in 2009, 2010. Most of the climate stuff we could find was either focused at that point around automotive, or sometimes around something related to food. So ingredients was typically the topics there. There was a little bit around biodiversity with the likes of Haagen-Dazs, as some of us might remember back when they had a focus on the honeybees. I think there is an educational point to it, because I feel where we became better as an industry around diversity and inclusion, I'm not saying we're at all where we should be at, but was to integrate more diverse voices. I think there was a bit more of an industry collaboration around some of these things that didn't seem as tokenistic as the stuff around climate. So I think there's an educational gap that needs to be bridged, and also because I do actually feel that I always look to the news, because I think the news and what they cover in the news is a good reminder of what people care about. And there is a lot of climate news these days compared to just some years ago. I mean, whether it's the Dutch entrepreneur who's doing the sort of ocean plastics cleanup. I mean, the Guardian, the 89 project is really, really exciting, where they asked people all over the world how many really thought that something should be done about climate change. 89% of people said, oh yes. 69% of people said that they were willing to pay 1 to 2% for mitigating climate risks. So if you haven't checked out the 89 project, please do that, because I think it speaks to something we forget, which is what I probably would call the silent majority. The fact that there are actually a lot more people who care about climate than we think. And also, I do actually believe that climate is one of those things that can bridge the political divide, and that now becomes quite, I mean, it's become a global divisive issue. It's not just in the US, the UK, etc. But if you think about it, I mean, preserving the land could as well be a conservative issue as it could be a liberal issue. So there's a lot of these things that inherently should be able to play into both sides of the political spectrum. So I think there's a good possibility for doing that. But I think it's definitely something that should be explored. And Elisa, to be honest, you just need to write that book.
But you are the book expert, so maybe I will need some help.
Oh, I don't know if I'm the book expert. I'm the slowest writer. I mean, 2 books in 10 years. I could definitely not, I say that I'm a very productive writer, but maybe I should be doing it. Good. So let's just dive into a little bit, because I think, and to Annalisa's point, in fact, I think data is great. And I think for some people, data is great, but I think what also really matters, and which is something that we spend quite a lot of time doing in this project, was to actually go through and view the 1,200 pieces of work. It's a lot of work to see all of them, but to understand what sort of creative levers are behind and what we can maybe learn from that. Because by the end of the day, it is about the work, it is about how it touches us, how it moves us, and ultimately, obviously, the truth. And this is something that is not different in this category. The primary driver of effectiveness is obviously if it touches you. So emotional advertising is way more effective. This counts in business to consumer. This counts in business to business, and we will be seeing both categories here today. So let's look at our first case here today, and we're going to play a couple of videos. These are from the 2024-2025 batch. If you have seen them before, fine. If not, then enjoy these pieces of work. We will also be sharing the links to all of you afterwards, so you'd be able to rewatch them or refamiliarize yourself with them. This is a piece of work from Canada, from IKEA. So let's have a look.
Canada is a global leader in sustainability, but Canadians are being punished for making sustainable choices because every time they buy a second-hand item, it gets taxed, even though it was already taxed the first time. That's paying tax on the same thing twice. IKEA, a leader in sustainability, wanted to end this double tax, now known as second-hand tax, or we gave Canadians back on all second-hand items. It's simple. HST 13%, SHT minus 13%, meaning our customers pay 0% tax. People went crazy.
We do not want to pay double the tax. Talk to your people.
Saying things like, they are doing more for us than the Canadian government ever has, and...
Great, so I just want to stop it there. I'm pretty sure that you got the majority of the case. Obviously look at the circularity, also kind of fun poking fun of Swedish. It's obviously Denmark next to Sweden, so my neighbors, so maybe you can even almost pick up the same accent from me. but Swedish English spoken over a Canadian ad is kind of funny. It's just to make sure that we get to see all the ads. As you see, quite a simple ad. This next one is from South America and looking at the topic of food waste. Obviously, something where I think a lot of brands should be able to do more and probably also more interesting work. So let's have a look at this one. Beautiful, right? To be able to take something and make it empowering, enabling, turn it into an activation, and so quite a beautiful way of engaging people around food waste. And to Alessandra's point as well, this is more about the saying than the doing. So, and as I said, you can see the full ads. We're going to share the links with you afterwards. It's just to make sure that we get through all of it in time and also leave time for more questions. So let's see the next ad, which tackles agriculture from obviously quite a fairly well-known brand, Lay's.
बिन मौसम बरसात कितना भी झुकाने की कोशिश कर ले, अपनी फसल के साथ सर उठा के खड़े होने का फैसला किया है। बलदेव के खेत ने एक नया जन्म लिया है। सबलपुर में अपनी फसल की नब्ज को बिगड़ने से पहले पकड़ लिया है। धवल के खेत ने एक नया जन्म लिया है। सन की उपज ने खुशियों का दामन थोड़ा और भर दिया है। रमा के खेत ने एक नया जन्म लिया है और गुरैया ने अब मजबूरी की गुहार नहीं, जश्न का ऐलान किया है। एक नया
So quite a more traditional, might sound wrong, but sustainability effort at least told obviously how Lay's true technology is helping empower its farmers here in global South. As we go through this, I mean, do have a think as well. Which one of these might be a favorite of yours, and why you think these are particularly effective. And again, remember, these are a view of the 100 most effective pieces of work globally across awards. And I'll just show a last one from the 2024, 2025, 2026 batch, and then we're going to look at what are some of the common things we have learned, what are some of the creative levers that you guys can apply in your creative work going forward. So what are some of the themes that we picked up that can be applied when you go into creative development or when you think about your next big climate idea. But let's just watch one campaign more, and this time from DP World. It's one of the few ones that we have from the business to business category, but what I am seeing generally in the WARC research is we are seeing more B2B work showing up, and that's definitely also been a trend in care in the last couple of years. So let's have a look at this one.
Frozen food, a wonderful innovation that allows us to preserve, share and reduce waste. For over 100 years, we've been shipping frozen food at the globally recognized temperature of -18 degrees. But for a warming planet where every degree has a significant impact, we ask the game-changing question: does the freezing temperature have to be that cold? Logistics giant DP World partnered with independent academics. After months of research, we found the world-changing answer. Introducing the move to -15. A temperature change of 3 degrees wouldn't harm the food inside the containers, but for the world outside, transformative. Competitors had to become partners. If the whole shipping industry came together, we could reduce energy use by 7%, saving 17.7 million tons of carbon every year. the equivalent of taking 3.8 million cars off the road overnight. Launched at COP28, the move to -15 showed that fundamental global change is possible. We shared our research with the world, and an open letter urged companies to join us in the seemingly impossible. A more sustainable future takes innovation and can cost millions.
So quite an interesting case there, and it also shows the power of collaboration, that obviously on quite a few sustainability themes we can be collaborators rather than competitors. I don't know if there was any of these 4 ones that stood out to you and why, but very curious to kind of hear that in the chat as well. So do share if you had any one of these favorites. And then let's go towards the sort of 5 key creative levers when we look at the 12 years of the world's most effective campaigns globally, based on analyzing about 1,200 pieces of campaigns, so quite a substantial data set, and what we could learn from that. So let's just go back here into the deck again. So there's sort of five key themes that emerged. One with reward the right behavior, so a significant focus on obviously nudging behavior change, whatever you want to call it. Secondly, around empowering people, and thirdly, about rethinking problems. Reframing problems seem to be a big thing, and we have seen this across just the 24, 25, 26 work. If we look at number 4, it is get personal. This was something that we also spoke about with Annalisa, that we need that. And the next one is sort of create a new category, driving innovation. So let's just look at some examples there. The first one is really about rewarding the right behavior. So this is one of the key takeaways, one of the things that we could learn from. So we saw a lot of nudging campaigns, a lot of behavior change campaigns. This was quite a simple one, in fact, from Tesco Malaysia, that created quite a nice little campaign around that. And let's see here.
Due to the lack of awareness of the global issues, Malaysians are much less aware of the impact of plastics.
Single-use carrier bags are killing our ocean. We need to do something to stop that. Until we can fundamentally change people's behaviour, we won't be able to make a difference.
Quite beautiful how they use behavior change. They take an existing system and reward people for that. As I said, introductory-wise, quite interesting. I know obviously plastic bags are controversial. Global North, many markets, we have luckily waved goodbye to them more and more, but obviously the Global South, this is an issue, and how do you then work within that existing system and still to reward people reusing it. I had another case. This is not part of the WARC research, but I was in Myanmar, Burma, obviously before the unfortunate recent events, and there one of the supermarket chains did actually have a fast track, so anyone who had a reusable bag could use the fast track through the supermarket, so they would get rewarded with time, not money. So also quite an interesting case. So the second lever that we saw across a lot of this work is around empowerment, and there's many ways that can be done. This is a campaign from the US, and some of you might remember this campaign, but I think it also shows the potential that is around sort of agriculture, and also speaks to this idea about bridging the political divide. But let's have a look at the case.
Farming is no longer about quality. It's about producing more, faster, cheaper. Most farmers would love to grow natural food again, but we're on a treadmill that we can't get off of. Transitioning to organic takes 3 years of significant investment, and you might not have a buyer at the end of the road. We sign today, and it guarantees us a buyer for organic product in 3 years.
Contract for Change guarantees farmers who sign today that Michelob Ultra will be their first organic customer 3 years from now, when the organic transition is complete. That certainty of having a buyer removes the biggest barrier to going organic.
During the 3-year transition, our production drops, so we lose money.
This is another big reason why only 1% of farmland is organic. The contract includes a commitment from Anheuser-Busch to buy the crops during the transition for its yearly production of non-organic beers at a 25% higher price, so the farmers keep the same income. Finally, the contract includes in-depth training through the most important agricultural organizations.
Going organic.
So this is obviously something that we see across many other different similar agricultural practices, where there's coca and other things. Recently, for example, Nordic, the government in most countries are doing this, but we see that, for example, regenerative farming, which is becoming increasingly popular, is also one of the ways that big companies can support that. Rethink problems completely. So how to combat food waste. I've always really loved this campaign that goes quite a few years back. It's been imitated many times, copied many times, but it also kind of brings out feelings. I mean, I never really felt for a carrot, but suddenly I do. The ugly carrot in a soup, who cares? So taking foods that didn't really live up to European Union standards in terms of how a carrot should look like, long and slim and similar looking, and then breathing life into it. So you basically take things that would be discarded and turn that into produce. So also a possibility to sell this possibly at a lower price, and in a time of a cost of living crisis. This is also genius. I think there's a lot of things that can actually be learned from case studies like that, because quite often we end up selling environmental issues as a premium. Why not explore if it can be sold to attract and gain more people, as we, for example, also saw in the first ad from IKEA, by removing the double sales tax. The next one, which I think is a very important one, is get personal. So how do we turn how do we learn from what we see in the social sphere that is incredibly effective in terms of when we're emotionally involved in something that drives effectiveness? This is one very simple thing from South America. It's basically a little TV series where where young folks can meet up with business leaders. So it's a sort of TV program format, but it does put a human face on a lot of these quite complicated sustainability challenges. And as I said, Anya and the rest of the team of us will obviously share these links so you can view this, but this is one example. I will say that there is a lot of potential, as was brought up by Belushi as well, in understanding that environmental issues always, or at least most of the time, have a social component to it. So think about how you can take those environmental issues and turn them personal. Last little thing that we learned from this was, in general, just to kind of create a new category. Bag market has been one of the brands that we've seen over 3 years in the research that we have been doing, and what they did was really just making secondhand technology cool, exciting, and became actually the category leader in a very short amount of time, ahead of platforms, very well-known platforms such as Apple and Amazon. And a lot of the work is really inspiring, which actually shows that you can drive aspirational campaigns around sort of secondhand things. So again, I know some people are arriving a bit late here today. What we are looking at is obviously the data and what we learned from the data, 1,200 pieces of the world's most effective work, and what are some of the key takeaways. So reward the right behavior. How do you empower people to move from the brand saying, talking about its environmental commitments, to actually empowering, enabling people? Rethink the problem. Is there a completely different way of doing this, as we saw with DP World? Why are we transporting frozen food around the world at -18 if we could do it at -15? So really, really simple, well thought through. Think about how you can turn environmental issues more personal, make them emotional, and lastly, think about how you can create a new category. When we look at the decade and some of the themes that have showed up, and this is the decade, it's not the last 2 years, 2025 and 2026, these are some of the key themes. These looks at both the social and environmental stuff, but as you can see on the environmental stuff, what we have there is reducing waste and circular business models. And as you saw today with some of the work from 2025 and 2026, these were also primarily what was dominating there, such as the food waste one and obviously the circular business model one from IKEA. So not a lot of news there in terms of what's happening. The key thing, again, let me just reiterate that. Why is this more effective? It is effective because this talks about stuff that people really truly care about. And so always think about how you can make your work more emotional. That is the key driver of effectiveness. And I know I've been saying it so many times today, but it is really what drives effectiveness. So even though we're talking about environment, always think about how you can do that. Before we go to the Q&A and end up and give you all a chance to ask some questions again, also will say, of course, this is never really easy, and I mean, I've done a lot of mistakes in my past as well, and I'm sure I will keep doing it. In my first book, Good Advertising, this was one of the ads that I thought was absolutely brilliant. This was an ad from Honda. It won a Grand Prix. Looking at it today, absolutely greenwashing. This was a diesel engine that was just more effective, but things change. So keeping up with this is not always easy. It's kind of like chasing a rainbow. Just as you think you're almost there and can touch the rainbow moves further. So none of these topics are at a standstill, and it demands a lot of time to keep up with them. Just briefly, the work that we do, the team do at Good Advertising, is obviously being catalyst for your positive change, driving you to think differently, more creatively, obviously help brands stand out and become more loved. I will also just plug this little thing before we go to the Q&A. So every month, together with EJ Schultz from Ad Age, we run a streaming show called Purpose Hits and Misses. Don't miss it. We have an episode coming up in June. This is your way of staying up to date with the latest work from across the world. And I will also encourage you that if you have work, please do share that with me and the team, and your work might be featured. So we feature 3 hits and 3 misses. It's a very interactive show. It's a very participatory show. So you also get to have a say. It's not just EJ and I talking about it. I also want, I'm so happy to see that some of you that are part of the Impact Leaders program are here today. But this year we launched a CMO, the world's first CMO CSO accelerator, bringing CMOs and Chief Sustainability Officers together to bridge this, what seems like a planetary divide between the world of marketing and the world of sustainability. We're going to have a new cohort coming up again soon. We've had some amazing people teach this, such as Alessandro, a CMO from Dove, John Schoolcraft, Virginie, the global CSO of P&G, and Simon Hoffmeyer from the Carlsberg Group. So if you're interested in that, please do get in touch with us as well. Lastly, before we go to the QA, I will just touch on this briefly. I'm sure that some of you might have seen this photo. It was quite famous about 15 years ago, taken off Midway Island. That's in the middle of the Pacific, very, very far away from any land. These big, beautiful birds, the albatrosses, is suffocating in plastics. And I was talking to the amazing photographer behind this photo, Chris Jordan. He's been a very activistic photographer through his whole career. And I was chatting with him. We went through his whole photographic career. A lot of it absolutely amazing. Go to chrisjordan.com and check out some of the work. But at the very end, he came to this picture, and I was trying to second guess what this is about. And I thought maybe it's rising sea levels, melting sea ice, melting, whatever it might be. But what Chris shared with me really resonated. He said that he spent his whole career trying to scare people towards climate action. But what he realized was that maybe what happens is that people avoid the campaign, the photos, and keep doing what they're used to doing. So this picture is just celebrating the beautiful southern Chilean nature where Chris Jordan today lives. It's a celebration of nature, and hopefully that can inspire us to take care of all of our home here on planet Earth. Lastly, we will have the new report coming out in 1 or 2 weeks. We will update it on the website. So this is the old decade report. We will add the next 2 years in 1 to 2 weeks. And as I said, there will be also a podcast coming out on Tuesday. So if you're more interested in some of the data behind here, please go and download the report. So probably ending off with this is that I think we need more education, we need more conversation around these topics. So I really do hope that some of this research that I shared with you here today, please feel free to share that far and wide, because we need more fans to hit the effectiveness drum as well, just to say to people, this is not just about doing good, but this is about marketeers who want to do great. And when you do environmental work, climate work, this is a super highway to effectiveness. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We will be sharing with all of you the links, the research. If for whatever reason you aren't in touch with us on our website, thomaskolster.com, do go there and sign up, download the report, and we will be sending you the key takeaways from this webinar here today. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us here today.